Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our last atmosphere keynote today. Thanks for the patience. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. My name is Jason Chan, serving as the chair of this year's Atmosphere Symposium at the Faculty of Architecture, University of Manitoba. As the 14th annual symposium this year, we have invited a set of speakers to address the subtext Living Together Again, to offer us the opportunity to reflect on the ideas of living together in our present and post-pandemic world. The recordings of these lectures will be available soon on our faculty's YouTube channel. There'll be another program event on March 11th, a conversation on living together again, with three authors of recent and forthcoming publications: Diana Lind, urban policy specialist from Philadelphia, author of Brave New Home; Megan Marin from CCA, the curator of a research exhibition publication entitled A Section of Now; and Johanna Herme of 5468796 Architecture, author of forthcoming publication named Platform Middle. Okay, with that announcement, as we begin today's program, I would like to acknowledge that the University of Manitoba campuses are located on original lands of Anishinaabe, Creek, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and on the homelands of Métis Nation. We respect the treaties that were made on these territories. We acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past, and we dedicate ourselves to move forward in a partnership with Indigenous communities in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. Now, I would like to turn it over to Herbert Enns, a faculty member at the Department of Architecture, who will introduce our speaker today and also moderate the discussion after. Herb.
Hey, thank you so much. Welcome, everybody. Pat, it's one of these windy days where the sun was shining for a while, but the wind chill temperatures are pushing well below 30. So that's what's the backstory here. Everything is white. I hope you don't mind, Pat. I could say it's one of Pat's favorite colors. And I thought I would, rather than introduce the credentials, which are widely broadcast, I would just say a few things to you. I do remember you as a thesis student at the University of Manitoba at a time when the school was still involved in things like the Shimizu Scholarship, and Dermot Nash was such an important figure in the school at that time, as you were. We all looked up to you, and I think in first year, we decided that we should visit the thesis students and get to know them right off the bat, forget about second, third, fourth, and fifth year. And so we had this habit of tracking what was going on. And I remember the work being really kind of, let's say, tight way back then. And then we were, if you remember, we met again in Texas at one of those latitudes things, where I think we had dinner together with a whole bunch of other rowdy people at the Salt Lick near Dripping Springs. And it was, on that occasion, Pat was lecturing with Pat Cow and Charles Renfrew from Diller Scofidio. And I was amazed in the end at how, let's say, succinct, quietly confident, and superbly dedicated the two Pats were. I mean, the Canadian motif, as it were, sensibility was really clear in the work. And I think this is kind of capping off of a conference on asking a simple question, kind of a post-COVID question maybe, and an early 21st century question, how shall we live? And I've been arguing recently, not arguing, but positing that perhaps when we teach the comprehensive project, as we do it in Masters 1, comprehensiveness doesn't necessarily mean reflected ceiling plans and life safety systems, but it really takes the whole, let's say, the whole world into consideration. And I've always been interested, Pat, in your work in terms of this transmission of effort across all of the disciplines, from landscape architecture and urban design all the way through to furniture. And when you list furniture design in your credits for certain projects, I get quite excited, and I'm a bit of a kind of a supporter of the whole picture. your awards have been just significant in building. It's been a sort of steady crescendo of one acknowledgement after another, starting in 2008, I think, or something like that. And now working more expressing your autonomy coming out of Architects Alliance, and before that, I think Diamond Schmidt. The projects are in some ways more you, I would say, more essentially related to your values. But as you work collaboratively, it's also this idea that you are able to gather disparate voices and bring them to a consensus. And I can't imagine the number of administrators that you've worked with across the country to get some of the water projects done, and how challenging that can be to organize your thoughts in such a way that a administrative structure can absorb them and indeed celebrate them. And I think that's one of the big victories of your work. We appreciate your work immensely. We thank you for taking time in advance of the lecture for presenting some ideas to you, and welcome back to Manitoba.
That's great. That's very gracious. Thank you so much. So try not to disappoint here. Anyway, okay. Let me see if I can. I can. Excellent. I included this from Robin Will Kimmerer's book today. She's for those of you who know her, she's an environmental forestry ecologist, biologist, I should say, but is sort of better known for her writings. I think obviously the timing is obvious with global warming, population increases, that and she posits this, our natural resources are not commodities, and that we should look at everything as a gift. All resources is a gift, particularly water. So I thought it was kind of apt to sort of start that presentation with that kind of thinking that we are stewards of our resources. And to that end, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, concerns of water have been, I would say, central to all of our work. There are the few buildings that are clearly infrastructure buildings, but thinking about water, and I think as students or any practitioner, we're because of the times, we're always thinking about how to manage water. So I'm going to show 4 or 5 projects, all that have sort of concerns of water at their center. The first 2 are a couple of landscape projects. We know that trees are sort of one of the most powerful tools of sustainability. So a little bit on that, a little bit on the kind of filtration and cleansing of water, which is that middle slide. That's the kind of sedimentation ponds in R.C. Harris, our water purification plant in Toronto, and how natural that process is. And then a bit on just the sort of mechanical systems, the engineering systems of how we manage and move our water in cities. So this practice, sort of referred to it, is about 15, 16 years old. And at the outset, because we're both landscape architects and architects, we spent some time thinking about how that would affect our work. Like, just not only how we could sort of position ourselves as a practice, but really what did that mean for how would our work possibly be different? So we sort of started thinking about foresting and finding, this slide is actually from an exhibition that we were asked to participate at Harbourfront Toronto many years ago. So we started to start to think about, urban forests and the kind of rebalancing of buildings and tree planting. The slide on the left looks a bit ridiculous to me now. Again, it was 15 years ago, we sort of posited the idea that all of the leftover spaces in Toronto at grade parking lots, gaps between buildings could be forested, and we would be a way of really improving the environment in Toronto. All those sites are now condominium buildings, so it is a sort of slightly ridiculous proposition. But the thinking around that was obviously how we could improve the environment by planting more trees. Toronto already has a relatively decent tree canopy, but we know that trees are great carbon sinks, that the bark absorbs carbon dioxide and exhales oxygen. We know that in terms of managing water, I think it's something like 100 trees can manage about 100,000 gallons of stormwater a year through storage of leaves and bark, and how all of that can then just flow back and recharge our water table and be back to the aquifers. We know that water, when it's discharged at site, what it does for the sort of quality of sort of ecology for plants, birds, insects, bacteria is huge. So it's so interesting. I mean, we, just even on simple projects, we're now using a lot of soil cell technology. And we really, the city of Toronto, I'm sure Winnipeg is the same, demands a certain amount of tree planting because it's been widely recognized that trees really have an ability to kind of manage stormwater at site. So, and then this is just a model that we produced for that exhibition, which was this idea of a balance or 50-50 enclosed spaces with, heavily planted courtyards. This was again for a space, an open space at Waterfront Toronto, where about 10 months of the year it's pretty nasty down there. So the kind of heavy planting of trees also kind of adjusts for a much better microclimate. We took that thinking about the sort of super real forest, the kind of constructed forest, to an international design competition for June Colwood Park. This is a strip of land further west on the waterfront that connects Fort York down to the waterfront, and it's one of these strips of land on the east and on the west of this area. You see sort of 30-story condominiums, and the main thinking about this was to build to construct or to plant an urban forest. This is very, very early days, just after the park is opened, and we planted, I believe, about 450, 460 trees on that site. This project is in memory of June Colwood. For those of you that don't know her, she was a really kind of notable activist and journalist in Canada. And she knew that this park was being named after her before she died. She actually had been diagnosed with cancer. So this is a voice print taken from one of her last interviews with George Stropolopoulos, CBC reporter. And they're discussing, her death. He's asking her if she believes in God, and she said she believes in kindness. So this is a voice print that we took, and through kind of graphic manipulation, became the forest floor of the park. So that's all the sort of the granite planks that you're seeing there. And what that also did, that voice print actually helped us to manipulate the tree planting into a series of tree clearings. So that's actually where the kind of programmatic events of the park happen. But all of that is happening here amongst very, very, very intensive tree planting, native species, to ensure that the water table, all that, that we're managing water and the life of the forest floor in the kind of most efficient way possible. So, the canopies of the trees, but the root system of the trees and how they carry water in the symbiotic relationship between trees when they're planted close together was all sort of interest for us in this particular project. Again, then when the project is, you'll see this as a kind of a reoccurring condition of all of our projects, a kind of focus on the kind of various one or two elements of a project and get that right. So the forest floor is absolutely key in terms of ensuring that it was permeable, allowed water in it. We used a kind of permeable recycled rubber. These are the trees being planted, and they're planted super close together. So most urban foresters would say this is not so great, but the goal here is to really get the roots close together. So there's a kind of conversation within the trees, the root system, and that the canopies are also growing up into one sort of continuous canopy rather than producing specimen trees. So all of the planting conditions of the trees are hugely, they're really part of the design and the experience of the park. So trees in a granular, trees in granite planks, trees in tree grates that can take this porous surface, and a combination of all three of those conditions are all part of the kind of experience and the design of the park. This is sort of a view. Again, early days, the trees have matured. And again, another thing that we try to do in all of our projects is make them a bit didactic or at least evocative. And we kind of go back to the internet time and again to see how people are responding and using the things that we've designed and built. So these are some examples of it. The pink maze is particularly popular. So that kind of connecting back as a way, I think, of sort of having people sort of connect to the work that we do and just sort of appreciate the importance of it is really something that we strongly try to encourage. Just a couple slides on this Borden Park Pavilion. I put it in because it really does talk about this balance between built form and tree planting or the urban forest. This tree room was put in after the fact, but it was always part of our early thinking of the building. So it's a kind of, the balance of, the damage you do sort of sealing off this site, you can kind of correct by the number of trees that are planted adjacent to it. I advanced through a lot. So this is an Edmonton project, and it is in a park called Borden Park. Borden Park is a park that's designed in the picturesque tradition of Olmsted or Capability Brown. What that means is it's partly kind of curvilinear paths, but it also has this kind of axial moments through the park. This is a plan of that, so you can see where the location of the building is, with concentric rings around it, and connecting and sort of developing some sort of symmetry across, the axes through the park here. And then the pavilion is really about collecting all of the program and putting it into the center of the building so that the perimeter of the building and being able to ambulate around the building is as submersive within the park as possible. And again, the sort of evocative play-like feature of this building is intentional that people can use it and experience the building in multiple ways is kind of really important to the thinking of our practice. The glass surface number 1 of this building has a reflective coating to deal with heat gain during the summer. What that results in is a building that's highly reflective. So during the day and depending on the season, it has quite a different appearance from the outside. And at night, obviously, it changes again. So projects that are kind of dynamic that people can experience in different day to night, winter to summer, are all kind of huge opportunities that we think that we try to capture in our projects. Borden Park Natural Swimming Pool is on the same site. There's a long tradition of swimming in Borden Park. I think this was a dugout from the 20s. Before that, it was actually just a pond. There's the location of the pavilion. To the east is the location of the pool. And basically, our pool building replaces a pool building that was constructed in the 60s, minus one wing that we kept for some of our mechanical equipment. This is a project that's really about cleansing water and conserving water. And so it for us is a kind of a materials-oriented concept for this project, which is, when we put this slide forward, is the kind of thinking of clear water against stone as sort of one of those kind of iconic images one has about the purity of water. The sort of pebbles in this instance kind of recall the North Saskatchewan River, which is the sort of, huge water course in city of Edmonton. But the kind of idea of the fact that we needed to achieve purity and cleanliness of water for a pool is absolutely fundamental to a public swimming pool. So this is the view of the pool with the 2 water filters in the foreground, and then the main swimming pool, and then a toddler's pool, and behind there's the little wing of the 60s building that we kept, and then the whole new kind of infrastructure plus amenity building for the pool here on the east side of the property. So there's the amenity building with the sort of change facilities, back of house for the pool, and then the kind of primary filter for the pool, which is basically a 3-meter deep granular filter. The water filters, the main pool, toddler pool, all set in kind of very co-planar idea, flush curbs around the pool, gutters around the pool, set into a concrete deck around the pool, and then surrounded by a sand beach. Excuse me for a second. So the entire building is constructed of gabion baskets, kind of, again, sort of to evoke this idea of stone and to use stone and to think of this as a seasonal building, that the building can actually also be permeable and breathe in its own right. Some images of that under construction. We used a local black limestone for the building on the outer layer of the cages, and then just a sort of systems drawings how to show how the structure of the building is embedded into those gabion walls. And then just an image here to explain the kind of workings of the pool. So it's a closed loop system that really relies on good bacteria in the water to clean the water. And then some very simple filtration strategies. So again, this is the granular filter here, which is about 3 meters deep, 1,100 square meters in surface area. And that with 2 water filters in a closed loop system clean the water of the pool. So here you're looking at the granular filter, the top of the granular filter, and the 2 other water filters. And the wall, this gabion wall that surrounds, about 65, 70% of the property, located here on the north side of the site, which makes a kind of great heat sink in the early and the later parts of the swimming season, because Edmonton, not unlike, all of Canada, doesn't get, guaranteed 4 months of great weather. So being able to put your feet in the sand and lean up against a heat sink is a pretty important part of that. These are some images of some working drawing images of that granular filter. You can see the sort of size of it there. The hoses or the nozzles that are spraying the pool water over the surface. And I just put this in, I don't know exactly what it is, but it really, I could have put in a kind of a carbon filter that you'd have in a regular drinking water container. It's really simple, everyday sort of, water flows through granular and comes out clean. So here is cleaner. Here is the nozzles that are spraying the pool water over. This is also a later photograph where we've included some of the plants are coming up that help with the quantity of nitrogen in the water. And obviously the nitrogen is really great for plant growth. And these are some images of the hydroponic or the water filters. So there's 2 of them. One of them is, we call it a submersive filter, and it is for reed plants. And mostly what that particular filter does is oxygenate the water. And then the pool next to it is the hydroponic pool, and it is used for the growth of zooplankton. So it's got blanket weeds on the top of it. so that the underwater that is kind of dark, which really fosters the growth of zooplankton, which are these little creatures shown and kind of magnified like a 1,000 times over. And zooplankton is in the water for the sort of control of algae. Here's a couple of images of the pool being occupied, pool with no one in it. I have to say I have swam in the pool a couple of times. The water is a little on the greenish tinge, and it feels a little heavier than regular water, but it feels great, like it's smoother as well. It hasn't got that sort of harsh feel of kind of sterilized water of chlorine. An image of the building from the toddler pool, again showing how everything is quite coplanar. Showers are kind of an important portion of the component of the use of the pool, because to use the waters, you really have to wash off any kind of sunscreen lotion or anything like that. They're set into wood decks. Some details of a kind of secondary material that we use to make parapets, window liners, and that is a kind of mild steel that makes all the doors and the parapets that have been powder coated with a clear coat. And then looking at the plan more carefully, that's where all of the kind of family style change rooms are, back of house for the pool, and the kind of interior palette of materials, which is, this is at the reception area. The indoor-outdoor relationship and the connection to the pool deck is hugely important. So all of these rooms open with these sort of large pivoting doors to the outside, and also provide long continuous views through the pool. The doors also kind of help to sort of give impact as it's sort of the sort of meter wide depth of the gabion exterior walls. And then the interior is marine grade plywood walls and ceilings that's rubbed with some black stain and then over rubbed with some white stain to kind of have this kind of soft kind of feel of a kind of natural landscape. The final image here, or amongst the final, is again to restate this kind of idea of stone and water. It's an image of the building from a distance. So this is the building that's probably a 40-minute walk from the pool. I put this slide in. It's a little bit nasty. There are a couple of little nasty slides here, just to remind everybody that underfoot, there's a whole other world that we're often quite oblivious to. System of sewers and utilities. This is a map. Edmonton uses the North Saskatchewan River, such as Winnipeg uses the red. Toronto uses Lake Ontario as our major water course for managing our urban water. And so this is a map that is showing how Edmonton manages the kind of overflow control strategy. I'm probably restating things that one already, many of you may know, but may not know. It's worth stating that because we have in the older portions of our cities combined sewer and stormwater, when we have a serious storm event, our facilities typically cannot control the amount of water, and so have to discharge that directly into the water course, in this case, the North Saskatchewan River. So this is a series, and RTC is one of these buildings that is meant to have gates and to control that dynamic flow of water. So this is sort of another nasty slide, which shows what happens when there is an event and that water can't be controlled. And then just a little article from the Edmonton Journal about, Edmonton beaches not being so great. So the importance of controlling the flow of storm and combined storm and sewer can't be overstated in terms of how it pollutes our waters, our drinking water, our fish habitat. So this is where the building is located. It's just a little button of a building. This shows sort of a diagram that shows where the sewer trunk is, the main shaft for the building, a siphon shaft and then a diversion shaft, actuator room that houses the gates, and actually a removable roof so that can occasionally be taken out and repaired. And that's what it looks like on site, which is sort of, as I said, it's a cylindrical building. I think it's point, if you can put your attention to here, what's not so obvious in that plan is that we've also telegraphed up to the surface of that the other two shafts and the kind of connecting infrastructure below up to the site, so that can, there's a sort of legibility or didactic quality to the building for those that would be curious enough to ask what the pattern on the site is. Here's an image of the building, looking at it in winter. There's the sort of removable roof component, a kind of detail showing that the sort of the gates, removable roof. And then we developed this. I mean, all of our projects, everybody's projects have budgets. These projects, even infrastructure buildings, have kind of pretty rigorous budgets. So, but we did manage to develop this project with a double wall. But we used a kind of a material. So that's the first level. We used a material that's kind of commonly used in Edmonton, which is glass block as a cladding. In this instance, so we found a kind of a really quite a beautiful block that is got a very low iron content. It's white and more white and a kind of sandblasted surface to it. So it has a kind of matteness to it. And then we decided after many iterations of how to deal with glass block to rotate it so it's all organized on a 45-degree angle. So that's effectively what the building looks like. There is a kind of description, a wall section showing the kind of cavity there. The building is surrounded by bollards. Just say that, again, back to, this is a sort of one material detailed building, which, just to restate, June Colwood Park was all about the tree the tree grade surfaces. Borden Pavilion is about the triangulated wood and the really minimal glass detailing. Borden Pavilion is about the sort of breathable, material-oriented concept. And this building is really all about the glass block and how we detail it at the base with a gutter, how we can detail the bottom of the building with a stainless steel cap, same with the stainless steel cap at the top, and then a kind of plenum that brings air between the glass block and the steel cladding, the inner lining. And then just, details that are absolutely key to getting this right. So understanding how many blocks we would be using at the head of the window, it's a kind of an exercise in counting. And then understanding that this obviously needs to have control joints. So here's a model of how we're going to do the control joints. And in this view, you can see that it's really, if you follow the zigzag of my cursor, really, quite integrated into the building. So really key details for the appearance of the building. And again, just to, get a little annoying with all my, it's important that people understand these buildings, that they ask questions about them. So, and this building, because of its plenum, allows for some illumination. So it can glow at night. It's the view of the actuator room. And that's the view of the building in the evening. So this is the last project. I hope I have time. SWF, it's had many other names, but right now is only called Stormwater Facility. This just recently opened about a year ago in Toronto, although we started working on the project in 2010. Starting with the slide of the R.C. Harris filtration plant, which is our water treatment plant in Toronto. It's a well-loved building, the subject of novels. It's a building that was built at a time when obviously infrastructure was meaningful to the city. And so we often refer to this building when we say that infrastructure buildings, like RTC or like this stormwater building, really need to we really need to invest in them architecturally to elevate the role of infrastructure in our cities and to make the importance of infrastructure more understandable to the general population. So this is our building on a very foggy day. Sorry, not the foggy photographs. But this is our site. So just to kind of go back to one, so beautiful building next to Lake Ontario. Our building is tucked behind the Gardner Expressway. So kind of different times, different site, but a kind of pretty interesting site nonetheless. This is what the location of the building within the sort of eastern side of Toronto. Downtown Toronto is over here on the left. And this building is, what's great about it is that it is a recognition for these three new neighborhoods that are being developed by Waterfront Toronto, that stormwater should be separated from sewage. So these all have separate stormwater facilities, but notwithstanding that, stormwater is still pretty dirty. It's kind of interesting, kind of how bad it really is. So yeah, so that's why I have another nasty slide to show you. So this is obviously something that didn't go through an oil grit separator, but upstream, just a bit upstream from the SWF facility is an oil grit separator, which deal with hydrocarbons, sedimentation, but tons of stuff like junk, like plastic bags. The people that were constructing, Graham Constructed, that were constructing a stormwater building, kept saying the stuff that they found in the shaft that had gotten through the oil grit separator, like knapsacks, needles, you can imagine cigarette butts. You can just imagine what goes into our sewers and how absolutely critical the cleaning of that is. And again, I just sort of stress, unless you work in a project like this, sometimes, I mean, depending on who you are, many people are way more knowledgeable than I am. You just don't really know how bad this water can be and how irresponsible we are sometimes as citizens. So just a quick diagram about how water flows into the principal shaft through siphon effect, delivers water up into the plant, back down, eventually goes over and out into the Keating Channel, and then into Lake Ontario. And then that's a plan diagram pretty much of the same thing. So here is the constructed building. There is the shaft, the sort of center, the relationship between shaft and plant here. The site of the building is, as I was mentioning, the Gardner is just over here, the Gardner Expressway. It's just over here separating the site from the water, but it's really in an area, there's the kind of new neighborhood, the Canary District, being home to many thousands of people, but it is sort of in this infrastructural zone where the heavy rail transit, commuter transit for GO Transit is located just to the north, a major hydro easement just directly to the north of the building. So the thinking, our early thinking or kind of conceptual thinking of this building is, again, sort of an interest in stone and water and what that evokes in terms of water quality and water purity, but was a kind of idea of a well, in this case, an idea that you would invert the well and the well would become the vessel. Many, of course, again, many different iterations of this. I'm just showing you kind of what we landed upon, but this sort of manipulation of a simple volume and how we could manipulate it so that it actually does, in many ways, tell the kind of story of water, so that the pitching of the roofs really help to kind of show in a rain event how water is being managed, how water is flowing across this building to be sort of kind of make that experience for the citizens of Toronto more evocative. There's a 3D model of that. Again, it's, I think, super important that as the way that we think about the landscape is the way that we think about the building. So in this case, this concrete, cast in place concrete building has a kind of comparable surface on the ground. That's been kind of pulled back a little bit. We don't have as much of a plinth now. We're waiting for a kind of second phase of construction for that. But that there's a kind of similar material that unifies the ground plane with the building, shows the kind of shedding of the water, and then that's further, story of that is further articulated by gutters that are cast into the wall, into the roof of the building, down the wall, perimeter gutter of the building, and then carried to the shaft, and collected into the sort of the major shaft. Again, sort of very straightforward cleaning of water. It starts with the principle of sedimentation, which is the same as Borden Pool, which is kind of the same as R.C. Harris. But anyway, here's the shaft. Water comes in. It goes into these sedimentation tanks, which is about water settling. In this instance, it's kind of sped up with a chemical called alum, which kind of coagulates the solid particles in the tanks. So sometimes they're called flocculation tanks. At any rate, it is again, it's a process that relies on sedimentation. These are some of the beautiful filtration beds that you find in the R.C. Harris building. And this is the stormwater plant, just taken some stills from a video showing water coming in, kind of dirty, water through the sort of cleansing process. And then, and this is not actually a Keating channel, but this is sort of what it would look like when it gets discharged back into Keating channel. This is, it's important in the way that we work in the office. We work three-dimensionally. We do a lot of renderings. We like to compare what we render. You know, we want to be as certain about what we're building as we can be. So this is the completed project. It's actually fenced off right now, and we're waiting for Lakeshore Boulevard to be reinstated, and so that we can kind of complete the landscaping of the plan and that the site can be open to the public. This building, it was important that the roof and wall and the ground plane to us was of like material. So the choice of a cast in place building was sort of logical. We could not afford a sort of sandwich panel building. So this is a kind of modified barrier wall rain screen building. So the 400 millimeter thick cast in place wall which really doesn't allow for much moisture, but if moisture does get through, there's a rain screen and a gutter system on the interior of the building to manage any moisture. Again, the kind of development of the gutter and how all of the gutter and the ground plane connects with the rest of the building is a really important part of the design considerations. So some renderings of the gutter, renderings at the sort of moments where we have to get access into the building. And then I just include some details about the landscape, just to reiterate the importance of the kind of connection of the building to the horizontal surface of the ground plane. We had nothing to do with the design of the shaft, but we were pretty intrigued by it. So we rendered it anyway, because we think it's an important part of the story. We also photographed a lot of things during construction. This one in particular, like, sort of incredibly cool. The shaft is about 300 feet deep. It's about 60 feet wide in diameter. So it can manage a lot of water. These are some views of the rebar, just as the formwork is going up before they're pouring the exterior walls of the building. You know, an arch shot of that rebar, and then an image of the roof while it's being partially poured. It's partly been poured here. It's just on under construction, and then kind of an image of the size and the scale of the infrastructure that goes into a building like this is kind of pretty remarkable and very, very cool in our mind. And then to get it right, you know, sort of included these, which we use these for shop drawings, but also to communicate with the contractor, to work things out through ourselves, the importance of understanding of how the control joints of the building could be continuous, that the board plywood of the formwork would be continuous wall and ceiling. So it's not just the material, but it's all of the math behind all of that. Is absolutely key that gets um, executed in an absolutely consistent way. Even to the extent with this fairly strong pitch organization of snow guards on the roof. As a major skylight, we've done other infrastructure buildings that I'm not talking about today, but it's been, it's well documented that the introduction of natural light greatly improves the quality of the workspace. So some images of that skylight, which is very coplanar on the outside with silicone joints so that it really reads as monolithically as possible. This is an image from a drone shot, but this skylight is actually possible to be seen as you're driving along the Gardner carefully, as a bit of a beacon that announces the presence of this building late in the day in the winter and during the night in the summer. The kind of coplanar quality of the skylight that I was talking about, and then just some images of close-ups of the gutter system with Hydro One tower in the background. And I believe this is our last slide, and I grabbed this from a drone shot as well. So there's Lake Ontario. There's our little building that's cleaning all the water before it goes into it. So the sort of symbiotic relationship between those two is kind of key, which is what this building is all about. And so with that concludes everything I was going to show you today. Yeah. I'll stop sharing. How's that?
Herb, you're muted.
Thank you, Pat. It's lovely to see this, the window on the understructure of the underbelly of the city. And working in it, rolling up your sleeves in a way and getting into it, into the nitty gritty. It's really fabulous. And out of that comes, out of this sort of whatever, almost wretched environment, emerge these crystalline forms that are kind of hope, that represent hope to us. I've asked Dylan Mull and Michael Butterworth to say a few things and perhaps ask some questions they've been thinking about. Michael, do you want to start?
Sure. Thanks so much, Pat. That was a really, really fantastic lecture. I think I speak for everyone when they say that. And I think I speak for pretty much everyone here too. And I say we've all been watching GH3 over the years and really, really excited about the work. And congratulations on your success. Before I ask a question, I do have to personally thank you, actually, in a weird way, because, and this comes back from a few years back when I was in Herben's M1 studio, and I was doing a kind of a soft infrastructure project in Reykjavik, and it really wasn't going anywhere, and I was really, really stuck. And one day Herb just came up and showed the Borden swimming pool on his phone, didn't say a word. We both locked eyes and just sort of nodded our heads. And so I want to thank you for basically saving my M1 project and the opinion of Herben's. But if I had one question, it's maybe, well, one thing you should know is we're heading into reading week. So most, if not all, the students just had some reviews. And I'm sort of thinking of my own students right now, their first year design students, and they're sort of at this part of their education where they're looking at the idea of time less so as a constraint or a problem and more as opportunity is not, that of course time's an opportunity, but more so as like a design material. It seems so implicit and explicit in all the work that GH3 does. And maybe to that end, I was wondering, you with formal training in building architecture, your design partner, formal training in landscape architecture, what sort of lessons were learned between that exchange, sort of at the foundation of the practice in regard to the idea of time and how it can be used within a project, if that makes sense?
Yeah, it does. Actually, it's so interesting because, landscape architects, when they design something, they design with time in mind, right? Because, it's like, I showed you June Colwood Park, those are early photographs. But what that becomes in the fullness of time is really something quite different. So the ability to kind of, as architects, we build it, it's there. I think we need to think about how our buildings age, which is, I think, super interesting. Like with the, I always said to everybody with the stormwater building, I can say, the color will correct in time, and the color will be closer to the color of the structure of the gardener, because concrete tends to kind of get a little to the warmer, sort of yellower colors over time. So keeping that in mind, those kinds of things in mind as we do buildings, but it kind of comes out fully baked, let's say, mostly fully baked when it's constructed, whereas that's just not the case with landscape. So being able to be sensitive with the two, I think, is really key. I think, the other kind of joke we have in the office, in fact, I was talking about it with some people that we're kind of associating with on another team, is that most architects don't like to have trees in front of their building. They want to see the building, right? Like, I've done all this hard work, but the kind of reciprocity between, we know how trees can act as a kind of environmentally, control, environmental control. It's not measurable, but is really huge too. So, we're always kind of trying to balance that sort of idea of, where's the tree planting, where's the facade, where's the, but I do think the idea of time, and I actually think the idea of time could be taken further and thought about kind of as a conceptual starting point, even for the building. So yeah, interesting question.
Thank you, Michael. Dylan, what's on your mind this afternoon?
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to thank you as well. I think that presentation was incredible and some really interesting things to be considered. I know Herb speaks very highly of you because I too have had a lot of exposure to your projects in our crits and stuff, and they're really inspiring and amazing. So thanks for that. My question is sort of, I was thinking kind of outside of the wastewater, this sort of like natural swimming pool and stormwater and these amazing projects that you've sort of presented today. Outside of that, I'm wondering if there are any issues relating to these urban water issues that you were particularly interested in, or you think maybe aren't being addressed as appropriately as they should be at the moment?
Yeah, I think we need to do a much better job at getting our water where it needs to be. So, in all of our projects, just even some of our multi-residential projects, we go to great lengths to try and use soil cells, which are expensive. I don't know if you know what soil cells are, but they're a kind of basically a kind of reinforced earth that holds the soil for trees, and in a way it helps the tree growth, but it actually retains water, and it's kind of an expensive technology, but when it's used in the city, it's really important. It's a really, really, really important tool for maintaining water in our water table. So we look for the opportunity to do that as much as possible. We look for the opportunity to plant trees, as many trees on our projects as possible. There's a really interesting project that you should follow in the city of Toronto, which is the naturalization of the Don River. And I think you could call it a sponge city. I mean, that's a Chinese coined term, a term about bringing water, like making sure all of our water stays within, don't mechanically move it away and then just dump it back into the lake, because then it doesn't have the benefit of kind of recharging the soil from where it should be. So the naturalization of the Don in Toronto is done largely, the impetus behind it is for resilience, because it does flood someday, and it will, because we've seen that everywhere else. It would flood all of downtown Toronto. So opening up the mouth, naturalizing it, and making a whole other outlet to right directly into Lake Ontario is part of that. It's a multi-billion-dollar project where the lead landscape architect is Michael Van Valkenburg. It's worth looking at it because it really does speak to managing urban water in the kind of biggest way possible. Like, it's a huge project and it's hugely important.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from the audience? You may perhaps raise your hand and then we can, Brandon, you can unmute too, or unmute all. There we go. Temp to be.
Hi, thank you so much for your presentation. I think my question is regards to how you approach your project. It seems like you have a wide variety of programs or a wide variety of typologies which your office addresses. So I wanted to ask, is it more about of internal research in the firm, or you actually approach professionals in those fields too? Or is it most times a combination of both?
You know what? You kind of broke up a bit. So you were asking me whether how much research we did on the projects, or did somebody hear it better than me?
Yeah, what I was asking is more of how do you approach your projects? Because it seems like there's a wide variety in the typology. So is it more of a research-based approach, or more of like consulting specialists in those fields? Like, for example, the SWF projects, like, was it more of internal research trying to find these details, or did you work with people that specialize in that area?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, all of those projects have, a variety of engineers on the project that really introduce us to the technology. Do we question the technology? Yeah, sometimes we do. Do we do research? For sure. But yeah, we're always working. For instance, the natural swimming pool, we worked with a German engineering firm who's designed probably 200 natural swimming pools in Europe, which is sort of where most of them are in the world. I think there's only a couple in North America. So, but yeah, and then, did he educate us on zooplankton and bad bacteria and good bacteria, and tell us that Europeans will accept sort of lesser water quality than North Americans who, won't. And so, yeah, there's always, a kind of, I can't think of a project, any project these days that doesn't have a kind of whole host of consultants on it that are specialists. And, as an architect, it's kind of, when you're prime consultant, it's like a fantastic position to be in, because you have people that are giving you information and you're learning things, and you kind of throw it back and you get something back. So it's really part of, the best part of the profession is working with others and collaborating, for sure. Yeah. I thought you were going to ask, and I'll just sort of offer this up. I mean, whenever you've done a project like this, or you would know this, you become a specialist, right? So now you kind of, looks like you kind of only do it. Just honestly, we'll design anything. We will take on and sort of any project if we think we have a client that's kind of even a little bit innovative and wants something special. So those projects are really, I often joke with some other of my colleagues that we just sort of nibble around the edges and get whatever project we can and make the best out of it. So that's and then just a little bit further to that, though, is that every one of those projects we think really needs to start with an idea. And that idea usually comes from the site or the program or the technology. But the kind of grounding idea has to be kind of clear in the beginning, and one has to be able to see how it's executed right to the completion of the building.
Pat, do you think your water sensibility is somehow migrating into projects like 25 St. Mary, where you begin to think about the distribution and collection in a slightly different way?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we're trying to develop, it's very difficult within kind of developer-driven work. But yeah, the developer on 25 St. Mary is actually fairly open-minded. So definitely we're working with Cormier on that, so it's not just exclusively us, but the courtyard, the kind of mid-block connection of that space with a number of trees planted, and the kind of the delivery of the public park on the other end with, you know, an extensive tree planting is absolutely in soil cells with the proper coverage over parking, absolutely fundamental to that project. And, you know, I mean, would both Claude's office and my office resign if we couldn't actually deliver that amount of vegetation on site? Maybe, right? It's so important. And then we're always, as architects, kind of super interested in balconies as a kind of mediator between microclimate, you know, a secondary outdoor living space, making them larger, making them big enough that we can grow things on it. I haven't been really that successful in that yet, but I think that would be the, you know, that would be the sort of logical next place where we would take some of the multi-res work.
Ted's got a question. Ted?
Hi, thanks for the excellent talk. Yeah, we've all been showing your work to students for years. We have some students designing recreation facilities and swimming pools, and also there's a widespread interest in the ecological, you know, the need and the urgency and the magnitude, you know, of ecological work that needs to be done. And it's excellent to see the high quality of design, you know, that your firm has been producing. I just wanted to remark that we noticed the weightlifting equipment in the background. And
Well,
I
thought I was more like that.
I was just curious, you know, how strong do you have to be, you know, as an architect, to bring this high level of design ethos, you know, which is clearly, I mean, design is often thought of as a luxury by the public, and expensive, etc., and extra, you know, but there's clearly this rigor of design in the office, and I just wonder how strong you've had to be to fight for the various design intentions.
Yeah, I mean, tenacious for sure, I don't know. I would say, you know, it's been a struggle, but it's kind of not a struggle because it's just sort of the way I am. So I kind of can't do it any other way. Do you know what I mean? Like it's just has to be that way. And then if it can't be, then, you know, we move on. You know, there's some projects that we, you know, have parted ways, or, you know, in a good way. So yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's a grind. The profession can be a grind for sure. I think we all know that. You know,
just as a follow-up, the internal design culture in the office, are there a lot of aesthetic debates? I mean, for example, about the minimal aesthetic or the symbolic role of geometry, or, you know, just balancing, you know, the plants and the concrete, or I don't know, are there some intense debates about the design culture in the office?
No, I mean, yeah, we do have lots of debate, and I like to think that, you know, everybody in the studio is, I mean, we work as a studio, certain people work on certain projects and other projects, but there's a kind of fluidity between, you know, there's 20 of us, so that it's pretty fluid about people crossing over and helping out, and always, you know, raising their voice as to what they think would be better. Often when we start a project, we'll start it with, like, you know, 2 or 3 of the least busy people in the office will sort of brainstorm, do research, brainstorm about it, what it can be, and then we'll meet as an office and kind of debate it and where we think the real kind of central ideas can come from. But I would say the sort of predilection of the kind of minimalism sadly comes from me, and sort of, but I don't have to police it. Everybody kind of buys in. So it's actually part of, I think it's sort of part of, once you strip away stuff, you strip it away, you kind of left with the essential, right? And so if you get the essential right, and I think we all kind of agree that this is the moment in time when that's important. Although we were talking about putting some trim around, a window the other day, we're kind of debating whether that's a bad thing to do or not. Anyway, but yeah, I think we all sort of agree on kind of, the sort of basic predilections of the office.
Don't.
Yeah. I don't know. You got to be fluid. You got to change, go with the flow.
It's always a pleasure.
Thank you. It looks like Bianca has a question.
The iceberg, because there's so much going on in your office, in your world, in your projects, and we just want to wish you continued, let's say, strength and tenacity, because you're really leading. However burdensome some of these complex relations are. It's really fantastic. And thanks for taking time to spend some of your afternoon with us. I'm going to hand it over to Jay to say a few words to wrap up. Jay?
Well, before I wrap up, there's another hand there. Sorry. So it's to capture that. Bianca, do you want to say a few words?
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Pat. Thanks so much, Pat, for your presentation. I've been studying Borden Park Pool for my thesis project because I'm working with a natural hot springs site and looking to naturally filtrate the water there. And
I saw you turn your screen on. Were you about to ask a question?
yeah, sorry, can you hear me?
No, we can't hear you either. Oh, I think everyone's locked down. Is that right?
Yeah, we can hear you.
We can
Bianca.
hear you.
Yeah.
We can hear you. You just need to mute yourself.
Jay,
Or
I've abandoned Jay.
No,
I
I'm
noticed
okay. No,
you came
Bianca,
on
go ahead.
screen
Keep
with a
going.
big smile, and you seemed you were
If you
leaning
mute-
into the
if-
camera. I thought you got.
if you mute yourself, Herb, it'll be perfect.
Keep going, Bianca.
Yes, I'm wondering if Pat can provide me perhaps with some design guidelines or precedents that I should look to. I'm aware of HCMA's natural pools guidelines that they put out, I think around 2016. But yes, what did you look to when you were designing Borden Park Pool?
Well, we worked with, oh my God. We worked with two different consultants. One was, and they're kind of more of a design build consultant, but you could look them up. They're called BioNova.
Mhm.
They're also a European company. And oh my God, I'm just drawing a complete blank on the guy that we did work with, who was amazing. Stefan Bruns at Polyplan. So look up Polyplan. Yeah, that sounds like a strange company name, but they would have some things on their website about they designed to. I mean, they would have some things on their website, but as a kind of fulsome document, I think that one that HCMA did is actually really pretty useful, right? The thing that you get that would be different from the Europeans is a kind of slightly different level of water quality. The other thing actually that Stefan told me about that's interesting is the more pools, the more different kinds of filtration, the more sophisticated the system, the better the water. Some pools actually just use that granular filter.
Yeah.
So, anyway, I would look at Polyplan.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Bianca, for addressing that question. Well, I'd like to wrap up today's keynote as well as the keynote series of Atmosphere this year by saying a few words. Now, Pat, in regards to your presentation, kind of offering of a reflection on our side, in my mind, is maybe the singular and singularity, the idea of the focus that you have in your work, maybe perhaps that kind of singular focus or singularity even of how you're pursuing your work in a very focused way. Maybe the kind of the teachings that we have to think about in our approach to living together. We're trying to do too many things, maybe. We're trying to do too many things overly. Maybe we have to really focus on one thing at a time and start building back into the community level rather than trying to connect everything together simultaneously, which we're so habitually used to, and really think about the fundamentals, what's underneath our foot, right? And then just the revealing that didactically, it's very, very profound and powerful work that you are doing and offering us to think about how do we live together? Maybe it's about really focusing on one step at a time and building back the blocks that we can connect to each other again, and thinking about the fundamentals and subterranean level and what's underneath us, what we do actually to what's underneath us. All these things are really coming through quite clearly in your presentation, and thank you for that wonderful presentation. I would like to thank everyone who participated in this journey of keynotes of thinking about living together. And there are a lot of lessons that we've learned and a lot of things that we are offered to think about. And thanks for being part of this community to think about living together in our post-pandemic or pandemic world as we move towards the post, I guess, hopefully. And we'll see you at March 11th, another discussion about this topic. And thank you, Pat. And we'll hope to bring you sometime here to continue our endeavor. We'll be watching you, of course, and watching you and your work. So we'll be following your steps in many ways. But thank you for your time to spending this discussion with us. And thank you all for joining today. With that, I'll close the session. Thank you, everyone. See you next time. Bye-bye.